19?
This is number 19.
19 years?
Yes.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And how long does it last, and how many films do you screen in here?
5 days.
Okay.
And so 13 blocks of 2 hours of content.
Okay.
So it could be several shorts. It could be one documentary. Or it could be a
Okay.
feature film. It could be a documentary with a short or a music video.
Okay.
We have shorts, features, documentaries, music video, anything goes, and web series. A lot of people are trying to get their digital production equipment open the market to a lot of people. Hell, an iPhone.
Yeah.
It's got a great enough. The 15 has a ProRes color pattern to shoot with ProRes, so that you can come out with two people or one person with an iPhone can create a short or a podcast or whatever.
Yeah.
So the barriers have dropped.
Yeah.
And so there's so much content flooding out. Good content, enjoyable, creative stuff. Some of these shorts that the young people are doing are like, it makes me laugh.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
so
amazing.
it's it took the barrier down, because it used to be, let's say 30 years ago, you had to get big film cameras, you had film stock, you had crews.
Yeah.
So at least a couple 100,000, 500,000 back then to make a film.
Yeah.
Today you can make one with an iPhone,
Isn't that crazy?
as long as you got good sound. And I want to tell you, your sound,
Thank you.
you know the importance of good sound.
I spent 2 days working on that sound. So
Yeah. Well, it seems like you spent a lot longer than that.
Maybe so.
So.
But yeah, nice, good. I'm glad you could tell. Yeah.
No, it really shows through. Your production values are really high.
Nice.
Really high.
You need to be in a theater, I think, to notice the subtleties of the sound. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I pick it up on my monitors when I
Okay.
watch you.
Nice,
Or on my
man.
TV. So
Nice. Okay, yeah. Nice.
So, Brian Rose in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, with your documentary, We Will Not Be Silenced. Tell me about Brian Rose.
Well, I was born in this country. A lot of people think because I dress like a Brit and I live in London that I'm actually from there. But I was born in America, in California, and spent 20-some years of my life in this incredible country. I don't come back very often, but it feels great to be back and in a beautiful place like Myrtle Beach. And it's fantastic to premiere our documentary film here. It means so much to me. It's the 6th one that we've made over the past, say, 9 years. And I would probably say it's our best. We're getting better and better at making films. It takes time to learn that craft.
Right.
And we're just really excited to get this message to the world, because I think it's going to change the world. And it's very humbling to be able to create something that could really change the world. And I think this film will.
The opening of your film, we got to preview it, of course, prior to the festival to make sure everything works, the DCP creation and all that. Your film draws you in within the first couple minutes. We didn't want to stop the film and go to the next just to make sure the next one worked. I let it run, and I looked at Heather and I said, we've got to stop this, but I don't want to. And I'd seen your film because I'm one of the judges, and I'd seen it several times already. It draws you in, and that is the art of a great filmmaker. So you've tapped into that craft very well, and it's very difficult to do. And so congratulations.
Thank you. We released all of our previous films on digital media platforms like YouTube. And so I've always told my team, when we make a film, you have to earn the audience's attention every single minute. You can't assume they're going to be there. You can't assume they're going to stay in a theater. And so for us, every second is important in that film to hold your attention. There can't be a slow moment. You really have to build that currency up with the audience. And so it's great to hear that reaction. But, when I watch my film, you better get to the point quick. You got to capture them. You got to show them the global importance of the event, and then go into your localized story. And you can't ever let them pause, because I believe if you give them sometime in minute 13, they're going to go to something else. So we're trying to really keep you captivated. And when you can cut stuff out, you got to cut it out. And that's hard for a filmmaker to do.
It is. It's like cutting off an appendage.
Ooh, it is.
Yeah.
If you ever watch the director's cut of a movie, I watched the Apocalypse Now director's cut, and it's interesting, but it's just not as good. And
Right.
So as a director or a filmmaker, you need to have someone with you that'll be honest with you and say, that's got to go. And I've got a great director, Louis Solarat, who did this film with me, and we've made 6 films together, and he checks my ego and he says, this is not good, or this isn't working, or well, you're not being emotional enough, or you're being too prideful, and that's what I think makes a good film.
Well, I got to ask you, you were born in California.
Yes,
Whereabouts?
sir. San Diego, California.
Okay. Do you think that rubbed off, the motion picture industry rubbed off on you a little bit in your genetics from being from there? Because you hit the mark. And I'm telling you, it's tough. When you get something on that big screen, there is no mistakes. YouTube, TV, you can get away with some mistakes. You don't get away with them in there. It's 55 foot, 57 foot. You're going to see them, and your film, excellent. And when you were talking about getting right to the point, but it doesn't feel rushed,
Right.
Like you're hammering something.
Yeah.
You're bringing people into the story. You're bringing them in emotionally. That's an art, and I don't even know if you know that is a very rare art.
Well, it's
So the California question. Do you think it?
So I'm in San Diego, which, as you know, is very different from Los Angeles.
Yeah, sure.
It's 2 hours away, but it might as well be night and day. But as you can tell in the film, I put a little bit of old videotape footage from, say, 1979, where my mom, as a kid, bought me a VHS recorder and one of those hand cams. And so I started playing with that as a kid. And I was making these little movies, silly movies, at my grandpa's ranch and playing with my cousins, and we were axe murderers and these little shorts. We had no editing software back then. So I'd forgot that I kind of started off as maybe an aspiring filmmaker. And then I put all that aside because I had to get a real job and get an education and go to MIT and become a banker. But it's funny, Jerry, when I look back at it, I always had that desire, but I never had the training. And because of London Real, and I started interviewing all these amazing people, I got the chance to start making documentary films. And the first one we made, quite frankly, wasn't great. It was our first documentary feature. And by the third or fourth, we started to understand what's necessary for a film. You know, a story arc, a hero's journey, all these pieces. And so I'd say for any aspiring filmmakers out there, the best way to make better films is to make more films. And anybody can do it. You know, we were just talking earlier, you can iPhone 15, you can make a film, and
Right.
I encourage everybody to try. So that's a little bit of my background there. But yeah, it started off in San Diego. Myrtle Beach reminds me a little bit of San Diego.
Yes.
Yeah.
Only we have a little bit more humidity come June, July, August. Okay. So
Yeah.
we fool people. That's why we have the film festival this time of year. We get them to come from California. They go, oh my God, your property values are so much cheaper. But we don't tell them about June, July, and August. And then they've already bought in. It's too late, right?
Smart.
It's all part of the program.
Smart.
Did you grow up actually in San Diego or La Jolla or Del Mar or around?
Yeah, so La Jolla is where I grew up, and then Del Mar, which is where my dad lives, which is right by the water there.
Did you surf?
I tried to surf,
Right.
wasn't that successful, but yeah, there was a lot of surfing, a lot of surfer vibes there. Yeah, I had 18 years. It was amazing. Went to school in Boston, and that's kind of my arc there as a kid.
So when you were young and you're going through high school, you start to set your sights on MIT, finance, banking. Is that how it worked?
You know, I was really a kind of a nerd. I was really a science geek as a kid. That's what I was good at. So I really went that way. I actually went to Torrey Pines High School in my later years where my dad lives. The first time I ever knew there was a football team and cheerleaders, and I was like, what's going on here? But at that point, I had gotten really good at science. And so for me, the next obvious step was to take that to MIT. And I got a mechanical engineering degree. So again, nothing from that past had anything to do with creativity. You know, when I grew up, maybe when you grew up, you know, no one ever said anybody can be an artist. You know, anybody
Right.
can create. And so I was never told that I could create. And so I think later in life, I started to realize that maybe I can. And I think everybody can. And so I started to develop that much later in life, much later.
Your trip from California to Boston, you go through MIT, you come out. What happens?
You know, I always as a kid was entrepreneurial. My grandpa is a cattleman from Arizona. My other grandpa was a farmer. So they're actually entrepreneurs if you think about it. And I always loved business and money, and my grandpas would mentor me. So by the time I got to MIT, I was interested in finance. And so for me, there was something exciting about going to New York City and trying to be one of those Wall Street guys like Gordon Gekko, which is a movie I've watched probably 500 times. And so that's what I did. I went there in 1993. I was the kid in New York City, and I kind of did everything there and learned everything about that crazy city. It chewed me up and spit me out is what it did.
Well, that's what it's supposed to do, isn't it? Makes you who you are. So if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So,
As I was leaving New York for London, I kept playing the Sinatra tune, saying, well, clearly you can't make it anywhere, Brian, because you didn't make it there. But yeah, one of my films features a hard-talking New Yorker who used to be the front man of a punk band. And he said, New York is the ultimate BS detector, is what he said. And,
I can see that.
It really chewed me up and spit me out in a big way, and that's kind of how I made it to London.
Your years in banking, what aspect of banking were you in?
So I started off as a trader. I was a derivatives trader in New York, and then in London I was a broker. So I would arrange transactions between all the major banks, the Goldman Sachs's and JP Morgan's of the world. And I did that in London for about 10 years, made a ton of money, and I thought money would make me happy. That was my biggest mistake for the first 40 years of my life. And at one point I was looking at, I was every three months I got paid more and more money, and every 3 months I got more and more miserable. And at one point I said, I better do something different or I'm going to drink myself to death. And so I decided to stop and start a YouTube channel.
So you are just in this little bit of time. I've watched you a lot on television, of course, but there's a distance on television of meeting in person. Here's what I'm picking up already. You're a creative with an extremely intelligent mind. So you have two wallets. You have your financial wallet, but you've got an emotional wallet too. And that emotional wallet, if it's empty, is soul-sucking.
Yes.
And if you don't fill that up, it doesn't matter how much you have in this one, it's a very depressing life. And it's almost more important, I don't know, to have more in this emotional wallet, have enough to get by, and of course make more, but have enough to get by, but to have this one full. Is that correct?
It's a beautiful observation, yeah, Jerry. Unfortunately, when I grew up and you watch the MTVs and you watch everything around you, it seems like the world's all about you. What can you get? What can you do? How much money can I get? And that's what's going to make you happy. I still think that's portrayed on our social media today, but it's just not the truth. The truth is that purpose and happiness comes from serving others, and I wasn't doing that. I was just serving myself, and it led me to a very dark place where I was very isolated, very alone. On the surface, I looked like I had everything, but I really had nothing. And so, yes, I needed to fulfill this creative side, this connection side. I had no community, and I had nothing I could create to provide to others. And so London Real started as a search for that. I didn't even know what I was searching for. It was literally me in my kitchen with 2 microphones, talking to anybody that would show up. There was no business. There was no scheme. There were no other successful podcasts. I'd quit my job as a banker. But little did I know that would lead me on a path to where I do feel very complete and fulfilled as a human.
Well, you are making changes in the world, you personally, and very powerful ones. So you chose the right path. So you're getting into the energy groove where you was always meant to be. It just took a while to get there. But the path here to where you're at now helped to train you for these moments.
Yes.
Am I wrong?
Very much so. Yeah. And sometimes our human decisions don't make logical sense. And I would encourage anybody out there who is feeling a pull to do something that you really need to meditate with that and sit with that and maybe act on that. Because our brains sometimes are not trustworthy, and so if I thought through the ramifications of what I was doing, it made no sense. I used to joke, Jerry, every year I would look in the mirror and ask myself, like, what are you doing? You're here having conversations, no one's watching, nobody cares, there's no business, there's no income. And for the first 5 years of London Real, I would just say, okay, but I'm happier, I have more friends, I feel more connected than I ever was, so I'm going to give this one more year, is what I always told myself. Little did I know I was developing all these skill sets that would allow me to create things that could change people's lives. I didn't know that at the time, but that's what was happening. I was learning how to talk to people. I'm very introverted, and I used to get stressed out just to have a show with someone. The whole day I would be like anxious, right. And then just to have a conversation with someone. And so I did that. You do that 1,000 times, you get better at it. You start to understand that a conversation is a story, really, in disguise. Right. For me, the very best episode of London Real is like one of my films. There's literally a character arc. There's a hero's journey. You're happy, you're sad. There's a challenge, there's redemption, there's a lesson. Like, that's the perfect show. And I try to create that in real time with someone I've never met. on every single episode of London Real. And I think that taught me maybe some of the art of filmmaking, perhaps. And I'm
Yeah.
still learning.
We never stop learning.
Yes.
And the minute we do, we're either completely egotistical and we've lost our way, or I guess we're near death.
Correct.
And the brain's just shutting down,
So
right?
true.
So,
true.
What I was going to, when
Mark Twain quote, "I never let my school interfere with my education."
right,
Worth everybody thinking about that. You know, I went to MIT. I've educated most of myself on YouTube. You know, that's where I got 99% of my education, not at MIT. So I'd say to everybody, think about what you just said, Jerry. Like, you should be constantly learning,
Right.
no matter what age you are. And nowadays, you can do that anywhere.
do you ever see yourself as now the person on the screen that's changing lives out in the audience as they listen to you and what you just said about you can have all the money you want and chase, but you're miserable. So something else was driving you inside, in your emotional side. Do you ever wonder if you're the inspiration for someone taking a new life's journey and becoming fulfilled for real? Do you ever think of yourself that way when you look in the mirror? And I know you're not an egotistical person. I know you're a down-to-earth person. But do you ever see yourself in that light, like you have maybe changed someone's life that was going down a bad direction by watching you?
So I'm terrible at compliments. I don't like them. But people stop me on the streets that see London Real all over the world. It's always strange to me. I went to Dubai a year and a half ago, and I thought no one knows me here. And two guys came up from Kuwait that had watched my show, and I would have never thought that happened. So people have said my show has changed their lives. I ignored it the first 100 times, but now I realize that yes, what we're doing does change people's lives. Even one episode, you know,
Right.
a conversation, not even with the most famous person. You might say, oh, it was the conversation with Jordan Peterson, or it was the conversation with, Sadhguru that changed people's lives. A lot of times it's something else. It was the perfect message that person needed at that perfect point in time
Right.
to get them to the next level. So now I have the burden of knowing that my work affects more people. And actually, that just makes me step my game up a little more.
Right.
So
Right.
that's okay. Now I have a real sense of purpose, and it's important. And so I actually show up even more in life now, knowing that I have that.
So you're in your apartment or flat or home or whatever
flat,
it is.
yeah.
You're flat, okay. You're filming your episodes. What was the turning point? Speak bluntly, that took you to the big time. Was there one episode? Was there one thing that happened that took you from being there to stardom?
So again, I started back in 2011. Podcasting was not really a thing. You know, Joe Rogan was doing it on a small scale in America, and he had inspired me. Now, I knew about Joe because I trained Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I watched the UFC. So I saw him doing that when he was on his sofa, doing it on Ustream when no one watched. And so it was an inspiration for me. But in the UK, I mean, we're all about 5 years behind the US. Nobody knew what we were doing. Nobody understood. My friends and family thought I was insane. My former banker buddies, they still won't talk to me. They think I'm crazy. Maybe they're right. And so, but I just know I got to keep doing this. And so my promise to the world, and no one was listening, was I'm going to do an episode every Sunday, no matter what. That's my promise. And that's what we did. And so in the beginning, I couldn't find anybody to come over because nobody wanted to come on my show. It was like friends of mine, somebody from jiu-jitsu class. I asked a homeless person one time to come on the show, and he said no. So it was really hard, but we just kept going and kept going. And what London Real was, is it was a series of guests that broke us to the next level, to the next level. Dorian Yates, 6-time Mr. Olympia bodybuilder in 13 was a big one. And no one ever thought that a guy with muscles could have a personality or a perspective. And once they heard him, they were blown away. And then there were other ones that would come later. And then each one kind of made us bigger and bigger and bigger.
Right.
But quite frankly, Jerry, it wasn't until 2020 with the episode that's featured in the film where we went global. You know, I had been dying to be covered by the BBC and the mainstream media because of all the great things we were doing, amazing conversations and all these things. They wouldn't touch us as a media organization. You probably know why. And so it wasn't until we became infamous that then the BBCs and all those started covering us. But those were the big moments. You know, 2020 was when we went super global. But every couple of years before that, there were times where we would grow 5x or 10x, you know.
So persistence.
Yes. It's just being relentless. I'm just relentless. Now, I'm a former alcoholic, and some of the most relentless people are. You know, I would drink myself, wake up in the morning, feel terrible, and do it again and again and again. And so with London Real, I keep beating my head into the wall, knowing that either the wall will break or my head will break. And so sometimes these aren't healthy for you, but with London Real, it kept me through some really hard times. And there were times where it didn't make sense to continue, but we just kept going. And so I'm so glad we never stopped.
That when you say there were times when it didn't make sense to continue, but there was still something burning inside of you. You call it spiritual, you can call it energy. It's telling you to continue. Go ahead and continue.
Yes.
Do not stop.
Yes.
And do you think that those low times, just like when you're training for fighting, the times when you're sore and you go to the gym anyway, that's when you're really training. That's when you're training to take the beating of your life and still walk out a victor of the ring.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, very much so.
You mentioned Dorian Yates. I don't know. Have you interviewed Mike Tyson?
No, I've not interviewed Mike yet.
He's a deep thinker.
Oh, very deep. I watch his podcast.
I watch anything I can watch of his.
Extremely deep.
And he's intelligent.
Massive.
And yeah, we can go into him for a while. But anyway, it's the persistence in the studio that we're building. That's written on the wall.
Yeah,
it's courage, focus, persistence. Coming down the stairs, you have to have the courage to act, the focus to focus in on what you want, and the persistence to continue on. And when someone said to me a while ago, "What if you die doing it?" So what? I'm gonna die anyway. I'm dying on my mission. What's more noble than that?
Yeah, and if you never quit, you will always be successful.
Right.
That's just the truth. But yeah, it's a professional is someone who shows up even when they don't feel like it.
Yes.
That's what it is. And so I just took it very seriously. And there were some dark days. I got no support from people around me. It was making no money. And we would sometimes even get criticized for what we would do. And at one point I had a realization. I was having a tough day and I thought, you know, why do I have to do this? And then I realized you don't have to do this. You get to do this.
Yes. It's a privilege.
You know, this is a massive privilege. And again, my life was always getting better as I was doing it. And I think as I was finally being of service. And when that happens, man, it opens the world up to these amazing coincidences and opportunities.
Were you married at this time?
Yes, I was, and started having kids as well. I wouldn't have had children without London Real.
But
that's a fact.
So these times when you're in that room, you had someone. Do you think this? Did you have support at that time, emotional, to say, "Keep going, Brian. Don't stop"? You
know, the mother of my children, she never questioned what I was doing. I think maybe once in the first 7 years, and that was very powerful, because she didn't ask about where's the money going to come from. She didn't ask if this is going to be big. She didn't. She just allowed me to do it. And I'm in that studio 7 days a week. You know, I when I do something, I get obsessed, and so she allowed me to do it. And that's what it took to get that show off the air. You know, I listened to an interview with Joe Rogan recently, and they said, "How long did it take you until your show was making money?" And he said, 5 years before it even had an income. And the only way he could do it is if he had the resources and the wherewithal.
Right.
Same with me. I always joke London Real was funded by the banks, because if I didn't have that money that I'd saved aside, it wouldn't have happened. And so it takes some resource and then some commitment and trusting your heart that you're doing the right thing, even though it makes no logical sense and no one is telling you to keep going and your friends and family aren't supporting you. A lot of times they won't support you, and that's okay, because you need to find your tribe, which is outside of that circle.
You're exactly right.
And that takes time.
I think Jordan Peterson stated it, be careful who you tell good news to. It can be very dangerous. Because there's a lot of people that are smiling and shaking your hand, and while they got the other hand with the knife in the back, wanting to twist and watch you squirm. So you're on this journey. You're becoming more and more famous, more and more viewers. You're getting to the top. You come across David Icke. Very colorful character who I've followed since the 90s.
Okay.
And tell me the story of what happened.
So Dorian Yates had mentioned David Icke when he was on my show in like 13 and 14 and 15, 2013. And he said, you got to check this guy out. You know, so Dorian was kind of hip to him beforehand. And I looked at him and I was like, this guy's crazy. Like, I'm not having him on my show. You're out of your mind. So I avoided having Icke on my show until 2018, you know, 5 years after Dorian mentioned him to me. And finally, I realized that even though I'm in the media, I have a media bias, and we all do, which means you assume that someone is the person reflected by the media. And it's crazy because even though I'm in this business and I should know better, I still had this bias. But once I sit down with someone on London Real for 2 hours, when you walk a mile in a man's shoes,
Yes.
you realize that I can relate to this person. Might not agree with everything,
Right.
but I can understand the decisions they make, and it challenges me to question my decisions. And so it took me a while, and then in 18, I had Ike on my show. And afterwards, I thought, wow, this guy is right about a lot more than people say he is.
Right.
And that's the impression I had of David. And I had him on another 1 or 2 times, and so we had a relationship. And that's before everything kind of kicked off, and he came back in 2020.
So he came back in 2020, and in your documentary, you state that you were told not to interview him. I won't ask you who told you that because I've got a very good idea since being in the media for so long. You did it anyway. Good for you. It takes a lot of courage. That first letter coming down our stairs takes a lot of that to continue on because people don't realize you're staking your reputation, not only your reputation, your financial situation on this, on these decisions that you do.
Yeah.
I'm a huge proponent for freedom of speech. Whether I agree with someone or whether I don't, I never want to put someone in jail for what they have to say, and I really don't care to economically boycott them. Everybody has their right to speak freely, and I think that's how we get to a better society, is if we can discuss science, and it's especially science should be discussed openly and honestly. So as David Icke comes into your studio and sits down, anticipation, anxiety, what's going on?
Yeah, well, first of all, as Elon Musk says about free speech, freedom of speech only applies when it's someone you don't like saying something you don't agree with.
Right.
When that's not happening, anybody can be a free speech advocate because these are people you like agreeing with you. The real test, whether you're a free speech advocate, is if that happens. So I'd say to everybody out there, can you really allow someone you don't like to say something you don't agree with? If that's the case, I agree. The best idea will always win. And we need more ideas, not to silence ideas.
Right.
So take us back to 2020. Early 2020, I think a lot of us forget now, there was a lot of fear out there. And I was scared too. I was in a WhatsApp group with a bunch of doctors, and they were estimating 1 to 1.5 million people dead because of this new virus. And it freaked me out. And I was trying to find people to speak to, and I couldn't find anyone that might talk on it. And all I heard in the media was the same thing being parroted. And I remember I was at the gym, and I just had this idea come to me, and I thought, if there's one guy who can perhaps explain what's going on, it's Ike.
Right.
And so I decided to have him on, knowing that it could be a major problem.
Right.
And so in the film, that first interview is March 18th, 2020, still very early. And David comes on. I actually didn't tell anybody he was coming on. And so there wasn't notice beforehand, which happened later. And I was, stuck in my own ways as well. I was in an old paradigm. I was a scientist because I was an ex-scientist. So I was a big believer in any science, no matter what. And I sat down with David knowing there was going to be a pretty serious conversation. And that's that first interview in the film.
Right.
I still remember it like it was yesterday. And at the time, again, a lot of people were scared.
And you don't have to answer this if you don't want to. Did you take the vaccine shot? No,
I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because my next question was going to be, if you did, after you talked to David, what kind of thoughts went through your head? Because when you speak about the vaccine, mRNA, what it is, what all this, I don't want to get into too much, and I don't want to take away from your movie. You can see a fear and panic set over people. It's like, oh my God, what did I do? And I just wondered if you had that moment, if you had done that. So,
and I won't actually credit David Icke for that. I'll credit Bobby Kennedy, because in the movie, that final interview was with Icke. About 2 weeks later, after we built the Digital Freedom Platform, I had Bobby Kennedy on, who a lot of people hadn't heard of at that point. I was excited to have a Kennedy on, and I told Bobby, I asked him about vaccines, and he broke down the history of that industry. And at the end of my first conversation with Bobby Kennedy in 2020, it was going to be very hard to take any vaccines after that. So I probably credit that to Bobby and the 50 other doctors I had on the show after my
Right.
conversations with Ike.
Was-
Ike obviously sowed the seeds, but Bobby really closed the deal for me, you know.
So when you come to the conclusion that you're not going to take it, was it a line in the sand?
Yeah, I mean, to have my seat in my leather chair after I spoke to all of these people, there's just no way I could go anywhere near, you know, something like a vaccine. So for me, it was just a no-brainer. Obviously, it was inconvenient. But
Right.
it was an easy decision for me to make.
How close do you think we came to complete tyranny during that period? There were talks of not allowing people in the grocery stores that hadn't had it, not allowing them to buy gasoline, turning their electric off, and people forget that now. They forget this.
Yeah.
These words being pinged around in the media, and to me, it's a test subject. It's a read to see how people will react. How close do you think we came to a complete totalitarian? Well, we were in a totalitarian state because they locked us down, but when I say complete, I mean almost like a communist state. How close?
It's interesting because something David Icke talks a lot about in those episodes is to try to educate everyone to realize that they don't have power. The only power is because you believe they have that power. And all it takes is a small, not even a large percentage of people to say, as David would say, we're not having it. To say, no, I'm not going to do what you say, and it all falls apart. And that's the message. If you can get enough people to realize that they don't have the power, it all falls away.
Right.
But if you can trick them, brainwash them, convince them that they do have the power, then we go into that totalitarian state. I recently read George Orwell's 1984, and I recommend anyone give that a quick read because, you know, that's where we could go or are going. And how close we were to that, we'll never know.
When we spoke through email when we got your film in, freedom of speech, something near and dear to my heart. I think it's super crucial, just like the Founding Fathers thought it was super crucial to keep. And I think that's why the Second Amendment backs it up.
Yeah.
And something that they've lost in England. And when we were there, one of the things working there for a long time, talking to the average folk, never give up your guns. Never. In the United States. Because they did. And that's another story. But with freedom of speech, when we talked through email, I asked you, can you put together some people? I was shocked at how fast you moved and how proficient and professional you moved. And you got big names extremely fast. So is this something that touches into a part of your soul and conscious spirituality that's a must fight, a line in the sand?
Very much so. You know, I was on the Alex Jones show right after we got banned from YouTube back in 2020. And Alex said, Brian, like, I can't believe what you did. Like, what was your first thought? And why did you fight back? And I said, Alex, like, for me, I didn't actually have a chance to think. My immediate reaction was anger. Mm-hmm. My immediate reaction. You can see it in the film. My immediate reaction when they deleted the video was to re-upload the video and then upload a vlog saying this is wrong and to keep fighting back. Like, I just don't know any better. And I don't know if it's because I grew up in America or I don't know what it was, but for me it seemed so wrong that you could deny someone's right to express themselves. Again, I had been doing this for 9 years, Jerry, and I had uploaded thousands, tens of thousands of videos. Not one of them was censored, and then it happened on that day. And so I just had this angry reaction. And it just, I know it's not right. I've always known it wasn't right.
Might be right.
What's that?
That's a warrior spirit.
Yeah.
I think not enough people are angry.
I agree. I think there is a place for anger. I think if you channel anger into intelligent action, it's important.
It's exactly what you did.
Yeah, and that's important. And we put our entire business on the line. The thing is with YouTube, it's 90, 95% of our business and lead generation. And at the time, it really was. And the good news is that I own that business, and I never really had advertisers. And we always had our independent revenue model. And so I was in a position where I could say, I'm going to do whatever I want. Mm-hmm. And it's weird, Jerry. I think every moment of my life was preparing me right until 2020. They say, you know, what is it? Success is when preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah.
And I was prepared for that moment. I was sober at that point for 4 or 5 years. I had experience in media. I had built my company up. I had relationships with people like Ike, and I had a team that would go all the way to the end with me. And so when everyone was scared and the place was shutting down, I was ready to step up and film those interviews with David in person in our studio and to keep that content coming. And that was something that changed a lot of people's opinions around the world. But it was just because I was ready to do that.
Right.
And so, I don't know where that came from, but it was just this reaction, and I had to do it.
Right.
Yeah. And I did a podcast in Dubai a couple months ago, and the guy said, he said, Brian, I watched you do that, and I thought, you're crazy. You've just ruined everything you've built. You've ruined everything. I thought you lost your mind, is what he said. And I said, really? I said, I meet people now in the streets, and that is the moment that meant the most to them, when I did something stupid or I ruined my show. It's like I stood up for what I believed in. But to this day, a lot of people think I ruined everything I had built or did all that. And but to me, that was our greatest moment somehow.
That's when your warrior spirit came through. Where it came from is the same place that took you to the dojo or to the jiu-jitsu training. That's where that came from. It's the fighter in you. It's the warrior spirit, and it's been bred out of people. I remember when I grew up, mothers telling their boys, "Oh, always walk away, never fight." No, there's times you have to fight.
Yes.
And remember what you're talking about. If the founding fathers would have lost the colonial war, what would they have been named? Terrorists. They'd have been hung. And in the history books, you'd have read about how bad they were. But because they won, now they're heroes.
Yeah.
So the winner of the war writes history. And you're not going to win the war unless you fight, unless you stand your ground. And that doesn't mean go crazy. It means stand your ground and fight when the fight comes. And when the government tells people, don't behave that way, what do their war machines do? Don't behave that way, but we will. So it tells you what works. What works is standing resolve in your beliefs and have your beliefs centered from a proper place, and then being willing to give your life for it. And I think you're a prime example of that. And I think you've been an inspiration to so many people who were sitting on that fence post not knowing which way to go because the fear, the constant berating of the media, and then turning people on the media against people who would not take the shot and making them into murderers, villains. And when people go back in time and they say, how could the Bolshevik Revolution have happened? How could Stalin kill 20 million of his own? How could Germany kill 6 million? How could this happen? You witnessed it once again. It just didn't go to quite those extremes yet, because the masters of media didn't make that call. Get them. But there were people out there that would have done it if they'd have been given the call. Do you think?
The media is such a powerful force, and we don't understand it. Most people don't realize how powerful it is. You do, because you've been in the business for a long time. And at that point in time, any contrarian thought was locked down so fast that everybody was in this echo chamber saying the same message. And when those interviews between myself and Ike started getting into people's heads, I'm telling you, Jerry, something deep down inside of them knew that there was some truth in there. I always ask myself, why? Why did the conversation between me and David go around the world? Why was it watched so many times? Why was it shared? I feel like it's more than just the words in there. It was the energy of the two of us, and they felt there was truth in there. Right. I feel like humans can sense truth, and they knew they weren't being told the truth somehow with the rest of the media. And so that's why I think it resonated so much with people, because somehow we were capturing energy. The media is so powerful, and you know this as well. I believe we actually captured some type of energy with those ones and zeros, those digital files. And that's what went into people's hearts and really changed their whole perception of what was going on. And I always tell people, it shows what a small group of people can do. They can change the narrative. And sometimes we get scared of these massive technology companies, these Googles and these governments. But like we showed back in 2020, that a small group of people, a bigger group that I call the London Real Army worldwide, a tiny amount of funding can literally fight back and win. And we can do that over and over again, whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's CBDCs or anything else that's threatening us, we can win. And I want people to remember that. And when it comes back to the fight, everyone's got some fight in them. They just got to connect to that. Everybody knows their purpose. It's there. You just got to find it. Get through all the nonsense and connect your brain to your heart. Everyone's got it, and we need everybody to be prepared to do that.
Right.
It's such an important moment.
Everybody living today has fight in their genetics or they wouldn't be alive, because their genetic would have died off many years ago. So in that time span, someone was good with an arrow, someone was good with a spear, someone was good with a sword, or they wouldn't be here. So it's in there. It's like you said, connecting with that DNA, that memory bank of our ancestors, to stand for the truth, as you did, in a big and bold way, is so crucial. And it's more change happens from something like what you did and took on than I think even you can imagine.
I think so. And at the time, I literally had no idea that it was happening. And you can see in the film, I'm literally locked down in a city and stuck in a studio with 4 or 5 people that are crazy enough to even, break the travel ban and come in. We didn't realize the effect we were having around the world. In the movie, you can see I'm bumping into people on the streets, and they're like, "Keep going, Brian. We think you're right." And online, it says the world's crazy. Out here, everything seems normal. But I didn't realize all the effect we were having around the world. But somehow I felt the energy of everyone around the world saying, "Keep going, Brian, keep going, keep going." So I do think we're all connected somehow, and that really made a difference.
Right. Well, remember, when anyone wants to control someone, the only thing they have to really censor is the truth. Because if you're out there, hey, the moon is made of green cheese. Let's get a ladder and we'll climb up and get some tonight. No one's going to, you get an amusement out of it and a laugh, but who cares if someone speaks that way, because no one's going to believe it anyway. The only thing that has to be censored is elements of truth or complete truth, because it's dangerous. It's dangerous to an agenda, a narrative.
That's very well said. Very well said. And that's why free speech is so important, because the best idea will always win. Always win. When they took my videos off YouTube, there were these other videos that people put up that think the earth is flat. Okay, now it's none of my business if you think the earth is flat, but YouTube allows those because they think the best idea will win.
Sure.
And yet they took down my videos. And so, as you said, they always censor some elements of the truth.
What is the importance of motion picture entertainment? Away from news, away from that, what is the importance of motion picture entertainment on any type of psychological programming or anything? I don't mean that in a bad way all the time. We do it with our children. You want to raise them decent, moral, and this, and so we provide examples. Many years ago, just a side note on this, how many immigrants that came to the United States from Italy, France, Germany, learned to speak English. They'd go and sit in a movie theater over and over and over, watch the film and learn how to speak, because they knew what was going on so they could associate the words. How powerful are movies, entertainment, to the way many people will say our society reflects the movies we make? How powerful are movies?
So important. You understand this because you've been in this industry for decades. Most people will tell you they are logical creatures. Most people actually believe they make decisions based on logic, and yet that's not true. Most of us, 99% of our decisions are emotional based, and yet we can't see that because of our ego and the way we're made up. And a movie connects with emotions. That's what it does. Now, a podcast or a conversation can also connect with emotions. Sure. And that's the mainstay of what I produce. But I learned when we started making films and we started making trailers for our podcasts that you could really get someone interested by playing with those emotions and dialing up the emotions. Mm-hmm. And so as we started to make films, I started to realize that we could try to craft these pieces.
Right.
And that's what we've done. And with this current film, there's a lot to talk about because there's a lot happening here. 3 episodes of me talking with David Icke, they really don't explain what the subjects are, what the emotions are, what's going on around the world, what I went through, what other people went through. And that's when you really have to think about the art of filmmaking, which is something I'm still learning, but it can take things to a whole nother level. Because ultimately, people want to hear a story about an individual, and that's what they want to see. And so our films are a story about, this is what happened to me. Right. This is my story.
Something they can resonate with. And as they watch what happens in your documentary, there are people, not on the scale that you went through, but were censored in their own families, at their jobs. Don't talk about it. Well, I have questions about the vaccine. You may be fired. The family members don't want to talk to you because you're crazy, right? So what you did on a national or a global scene, they're going through so they can resonate and find power in how you handled it. And I think that's the same with movies. You go watch an old John Wayne movie, right? And he comes into town, he becomes the sheriff, and he takes care of the bad guys. He kicks some butt, he shoots some people, but he's fighting for the side of good, not the side of evil. Taught us, you mentioned you were in school in the 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
So I don't know what your age is. You don't have to tell me.
52.
52, well, okay, I'm 58.
Okay.
So similar times. You go to the movies, you watch this stuff, you become John Wayne, you become Batman, you become this, you become that, you become a crime fighter, right? And that translates because people understand how to behave and act a lot through movies because they're larger than life. A sad scene's sad, but when you tie the string music in, it makes it pitiful, makes you cry. That's the power of movies to me. It teaches us how to behave in certain situations, when to be heroic, when to stand up, when to do this, when to do that. And I think it's a very powerful medium. And you bridging that gap now between podcast to film, like you have, even your podcast have a cinematic feel to it. Your design, I don't know if you did the whole design of the set.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Excellent job. Very, it draws you in. Makes you want to watch what's going to happen, even if they've watching you for the first time. So I want to also ask you real quick, did your dress code change when you met, is it Dan?
Dan Pena.
Yeah. Did it change at that point? Because I remember you used to wear like polos at the beginning. And is that when it happened? And I'll tell you, it really worked. It works. And it may inspire me to dress up from here on out because I don't.
Yes, so I always say I have to be very careful who I invite on London Real because these people changed my life. Mm-hmm. So anybody that walks in that studio is going to change my life forever. And that's what makes my show different than the BBC or something else, because I'm not some paid interviewer that gets told what to do. I literally make a decision, and when they come into my world, they alter whoever I am forever. So you're really playing with fire. You know, Dorian got me to come down to Spain with him. We made our first movie with Dorian Yates. He had me lifting with him, taught me yoga. You know, my next film was about Ido Portal, a movement artist, and then Dan Pena comes into my house, or my studio. For people that don't know Dan Pena, he is a high-performance coach who has a castle in Scotland. He calls himself the $1 trillion man because he's created $1 trillion of wealth through his mentoring, and he can back it up with figures. I think it's now 3 trillion. And so he came to my show 10 years ago, and at the time I was wearing skateboard t-shirts and G-Star Raw, and I think my shoes were off during that interview with Dan Pena. He wore a 3-piece Savile Row suit, and he looked like $1 million, maybe $1 billion. And he came on my show. I didn't think I would like him. I actually didn't want him on my show. I said no for a few months, but I was running out of guests, so I had him on. And he pushed me on that show. And he also said, "Is this it, Brian? Is this all you're going to do? Are you going to go bigger?" And we started a relationship we've had for the past 10 years. And I went to his castle. I made a movie about him called The $50 Billion Man, which he was called then. And we have a love-hate relationship, depending on the day is what it is. I both love and hate Dan Pena. Sometimes we're talking, sometimes we're not talking. We're currently not talking. And he's taught me a lot. He is the grandfather that everyone had, you know, the grandpa that tells you like it really is.
Right.
And he's one of the most talked about guests when I go on the street because Dan provides a commodity that is so rare in today's world. It's called the truth.
Hardcore truth.
Truth. Dan doesn't want to sell you anything. He doesn't care. What Dan wants is this. He always says this about his kids and about all of his mentees and about everybody. He says, "I don't want you to love me." He said, 20 years after I'm dead, I want you to respect me. That's what he wants. And so he's going to tell you the truth. And when people hear him, they realize he's telling them something no one else tells them. And we have an inner craving for the truth because we know the truth will set us free. The truth will get the best version of ourselves. And at the end of the day, we want to be proud of ourselves.
Sure.
And you can tell yourself all you want that you're doing okay. You can try to lie to yourself in the mirror. But deep down inside, you know whether you're showing up every day and doing what you need to do.
Right.
And so Dan has had an effect on my life. I always joke that now he seems to be using my tailor. But yes, I get my suits made from the same tailor. I've made the tailor famous now as well. And yeah, when I got back from Dan's Castle, I changed my game up. I said, wait a second, I can do more. And everybody was telling me how London Real was great, everyone telling me how great I was, but deep down inside, I knew that I wasn't great. I had a lot more work to do. I still believe that today. And Dan was pushing me to do more. And so that's what he taught me. And he taught me how to dress as well. And now it's become a signature part of who I am. You know, I ran to be mayor in 21, and the Evening Standard came to do an interview, and they called and said, is Brian going to be there? Is the suit going to be there? And so now it's part of my signature, and now I wear it all the time. And it brings something to the set. And so again, why did those David Icke interviews go viral? It was the attention to detail in the set. It was maybe the way I was dressed. And so maybe to people it said, this is something we need to take seriously.
Right.
But that doesn't get you past, say, 10, 15 seconds. I always say the set and the dress will get 10 or 15 seconds of attention. If you're still talking shite, as they say in the UK, they'll tune out. But if there's something more there, they'll go further with you.
Yes.
But it does give a first impression that maybe we should listen to these guys. So in that sense, it's been good.
No, it is. It's the first image that you see.
Yeah.
And it's much like in a film. You know, any people who have not been in motion picture or cast for motion picture, pick the great looking person. Whether it's, someone who looks like Pamela Anderson when she's 18, it's great. But if they can't act, after 4 or 5 minutes, you're bored with the movie. You're not being drawn in, because that fades quickly. It's the character that comes out. It's the acting that comes out. It's the person that comes out. But there's nothing like having both, right?
Yeah.
It's everything. You got the movie poster and the depth. So you've done it well. You really have.
Thanks.
So coming from where you came from, coming across, he's a mentor of yours?
Yes, very much so. That was another moment in the film as well. A moment in London Real that launched us to new levels was having someone like Dan Pena.
And it's someone that's telling you, like you said, like the old gruff grandpa that says, you aren't all that.
Yes.
And you need to shape up.
Yes.
Oh, you won that one? That's because you didn't fight anyone real.
Yes.
Wait till you come across someone that can really fight. There was never there's not that. There's an attaboy, but let's get better.
Yeah, I've had many interviews with Dan. There's one where he says, Brian, I see you 1,000 times better than you are. It makes him angry that you're playing so small. And that's the way Dan, I said, Dan, because you love me. And he's like, yeah, of course I love you. He's very hard, but he wants the best. And he is being of service in his own way as well. And he's pushed me to the next level.
But I've also seen him tear up.
Yeah.
So he's got an emotional side.
I can get some tears out of him every now and then. It's taken me years. But yeah,
you're digging deep.
I can get tears out of him. But yeah,
you'll be able to train Jordan Peterson before long. You can get tears out of him, right? So
yeah, but he had a real transformation on who I am. And again, Dan says you have 2 chances to make a first impression with what you're wearing, what comes out of your mouth.
Right.
And so for me, when I put this suit on every day, it shows the world, it shows my team, it shows myself that I'm here, I'm ready to go, and I'm prepared. And so it's become a signature piece of me, and I'm glad. I'm really glad that he showed me that. And on that same note, I'll say something, Jerry. If you really zoom out on London Real and look at what Brian Rose is doing, I think I'm searching for the father figure I never had, or maybe that none of us ever had. Maybe I'm looking for that mentorship and that leadership. Because if you look at all the people I interviewed over the years, I'm trying to find or learn how to be a man. I think that's what's going on with my show. And I'm searching. And whether it's Dan Pena or Jordan Peterson or David Icke, all these people are teaching me and the community and the world aspects of the greatness of humanity. And that's what I think I'm doing. If I was a psychologist looking at me, I'd say that's what you're doing, Brian. And it's not because my father wasn't great, but you need a village to raise people.
Yes.
You need a village of role models. And that's what I'm searching for. And in my search, I think I provide that insight to everyone that's watching. Everyone's a voyeur because when they see me, they see themselves as me. And that's what I'm doing, I think, more than anything.
That's beautifully put. That really is beautifully put. And we're looking forward. I do have another question for you.
No problem.
Favorite movie of all time?
Well, I mentioned the movie Wall Street earlier.
Yeah, and we asked that, but Gordon Gekko.
Yeah. I believe that a young man can learn everything they need to know about life by watching the movie Wall Street.
Right. So, so the Gordon Gekko character you mentioned at the beginning, Did you find Gordon Gekko's character after you went through banking and you became who you are today as a good character, a bad character, or an indifferent character of life?
I've always loved Gordon Gekko. I've always looked up to Gordon Gekko, and that has not stopped, and it will never stop.
Okay.
And they interviewed Michael Douglas, and he said, people come up to me on the street, Wall Street guys, and they say, he was amazing. I loved him so much. And Michael Douglas is like, no, he's the villain. He's the bad guy. He's what you're not supposed to do. And he's always confused that these people look up to him. But I always look up to Gordon Gekko. And in a weird way, the Gordon Gekko-Bud Fox relationship is a lot like the Dan Pena-Brian Rose relationship. It's a biblical tale that's being retold many times.
Yes.
I believe, of the father and the son and the rejection of and the teaching of and all of these things. And so I love that movie because I think it tells you so much about life and aspirations. But I, for some reason, look at Gordon as an amazing character.
So where is your journey going to lead with the freedom of speech? Going to continue, I know, to hammer home how important it is, that we can't lose it, so that tyranny doesn't really set in, because once we go there, it usually ends up in about 100 million dead or more. Is this going to be a mission of yours from here on out?
Yes, so 4 years ago is when all this happened. It's strange, really right around the 4-year anniversary. It seems like yesterday. And once those conversations with David Icke happened, we continued. And thanks to the digital freedom platform we set up, we had another 100 interviews on there that would have been deleted and banned on any other platform. And we continued to push the envelope. And enough so that we got deplatformed by YouTube about 8 months ago. But we believe in freedom in all of its forms. And so right now I'm running to be the next mayor of London. Our party is all about freedoms. Freedoms don't exist without property ownership, which is why in America you have guns, because if you can't defend your property, you have no freedom. And I'm glad you brought that point up earlier. I was talking to Tim Kennedy, former Green Beret, former UFC fighter, gun advocate. And I was having a conversation with him on the show, and I realized, I said, I see Tim, the reason you have guns is so you can protect your property. If you own property, you keep your freedoms. And he said, exactly, Brian. That's what the British people will never understand. This is why we have guns.
Right.
And I'm a big fan of property ownership. I'm a big fan of digital property ownership, which means all of my video assets and digital assets. I'm a big fan of the cryptocurrency space where you actually own your money and your assets. And so we continue to fight on for freedom in all forms, free speech, free and fair elections, ownership of digital assets so you can have freedom. And we do it in any way we can, whether it's politics, films, broadcasts, teaching in our academy. And so we're just going to keep doing this. I can't not do this.
I think you put it perfectly about the property ownership. Everybody has skin in the game, so it makes everybody behave better. When you have something to lose, you won't go off the rails as much. Societally, like criminally or something like that, you have something to lose. You build something, you work for something, you build it, you acquire it. I think property ownership is extremely important.
It's so important.
And that's a huge thing that's happening here, which I'm sure you're aware of. BlackRock buying up a lot of private real estate and where that can lead. But
and the World Economic Forum telling you you're not going to own anything.
And be happy.
Yeah, and be happy. And the reaction to AI is we're going to create a universal basic income. I mean, that is the worst idea I've ever heard of. And yet that's the way they're pushing us. I just want to remind anybody listening or watching that if you don't own property or any assets, you will have no freedom, period. And that's the way it's going to be. And so people really need to understand that, especially in this digital age. And what I like about the blockchain is people really understand that. The blockchain is a way to ensure freedom. Bitcoin is a way to ensure freedom. And as we go to a more and more digital world, you're going to want that. When my videos were on YouTube, I didn't own those digital assets. YouTube owned those assets, and they can take them away whenever they want. I want a place where I own those assets forever.
Right.
And this is important, and we need ways to communicate with each other that have no middlemen. That's also what's done on the blockchain, so I'm just going to keep fighting. We invest in a lot of companies that will actually produce this future. We invest in a lot of artificial intelligence companies that will make them decentralized, so they're not run by people like Google. So I think I'll be in this fight for quite some time.
I think you are. And you're an inspiration to many, and please keep up the good work. And we're looking forward to showing your film to create a bigger impact.
Jerry, I just want to say thank you. This is the only film festival that I made an important point to travel to, let alone travel across the Atlantic. You reached out to me early on to feature this film. This is before we won 20 awards of film festivals all around the world. And you said, Brian, this is a special film.
Yes.
We have a special film festival. I want to feature you. I want you to come over here. And I just want to say thank you, because you were one of the first to reach out. And I'm so glad to be here this weekend and support this amazing festival and the incredible work that you're doing and the bravery you have to put these films on the screen. That's a huge deal. So thank you. Honor to be here.
It's an honor to have you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.